Joining us now is MS Now Capitol Hill reporter Kevin Fry and MS Now political analyst and former Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill. Senator, I am going to start with you. Thank you both for joining. I was not surprised by this, but I continue to allow myself in the Trump era to be shocked at things. And I'm curious what your response was when you read this reporting.
Well, it's wrong on so many levels. And it just is a really good indication of how far this mess has gone in terms of the spectacle of corruption in the White House. I'm sure MAGA would argue, oh, he's raising money for things that are in the public interest, blah, 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 blah. But the point is that he's using the power of his office to strong arm corporations, to bend them to his will. Mm-hmm. And he's using the power of his office to do that. And that is the essence of corruption. That's what it is all about. And the other thing about this, I think it's really important for us to remember, is this is anything but transparent.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We are not seeing in real time where this money is going. Who is in charge of spending this money? I mean, are there funds set up for these various projects? And if so, we don't see the money going in or out. We don't have a clear eye on who's giving it. How many people are giving it under cover of darkness and then getting something for it? I mean, he's been pretty brazen. He typically doesn't need darkness to be corrupt because they kind of are doing it right in front of us every day. But the lack of transparency is notable, too. I mean, I can't imagine there's a Norm left that he has not busted in the Oval Office.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's always time, Claire. There's always time. Kevin, in the incredible Wall Street Journal story, the one line that jumps out at me is the one from the spokesperson who says the president can't be bought. And in the same story, there's a quote from Mark Short, from the first term, who said, there definitely wasn't a corporate shakedown like you see now. Of course the president can't be bought because he's the one shaking down the corporations.
Yeah, like that quote has
I mean, come on.
It's so frustrating.
Now that I've gotten that off my chest. Yeah. And I know the answer to this question, but under normal times, before this administration, stuff like this would happen. There would be oversight hearings. There would be investigations. If a Democrat had done this, also in this Wall Street Journal story, it's mentioned the Lincoln bedroom during the Clinton years. I remember that. That was a hair on fire moment in Washington. The stuff that's happening now makes that look like, wow, y'all amateurs.
But also, if a Republican had done this, a former Republican president had done this, Republicans would also be hair on fire.
Exactly. Yeah. So where's Congress, Kevin?
Nowhere to be found. I think is maybe the answer. At least the Republican majority at the moment don't really seem to care much about this. I mean, we know the Democrats are ramping up and want to do all sorts of investigations on all of these fronts. Mm-hmm. I mean, on top of all of this, there's also the various disclosures from the last month or so about the billions that he's making off of Meta and crypto, or not Meta, but meme coins and crypto.
Off the presidency.
Right. And so, I mean, Democrats, of course, are eager to get the gavels and start to go through these numbers and try to break this down through oversight hearings, through various legislative reforms. But until then, we've not really seen much of anything from the Republican majority. I mean, one of the things that you have seen when the president has, or Republicans have been asked, and even voters are asked, about kind of this, well, he's making all of this money, is, well, he's a businessman. He's doing great things as a businessman, and why are we surprised by this?
Mm-hmm. Claire, Kevin has some reporting this week about Schumer unveiling an anti-corruption agency that is aimed squarely at Trump. It's a new bill that would create an anti-corruption bureau within the federal government, an independent agency, he said, would wield sweeping investigative subpoena and enforcement powers. Then there's also House Democrats who are toughening their midterm messaging. That is from the Washington Post, Karen's Tumulty, which uses the language, hold the crooks accountable. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' emphasis on corruption reflects rising concern among voters about government ethics. I'm wondering, from your professional communications purview, any notes on the language being used and these ideas being test-driven while Democrats are in the minority, heading into a potential majority, at least in the House, maybe in the Senate?
Yeah, I don't think they would be shifting to this if it wasn't clear in the polling that people are now paying more attention to this. I think people are seeing how bad this family is behaving in terms of enriching themselves. Billions of dollars they're making off his presidency in their personal pockets. And that is something that I think most voters, especially those voters that voted for Barack Obama many years ago and also voted for Donald Trump. They're not the hardcore MAGA. They're the ones that put Donald Trump in the White House. They're the same ones who put Joe Biden in the White House. Right. So those voters are now really keyed into this. And I've got to like burst a balloon here this morning because I think it's important for us to keep this in mind. Kevin's right. They are getting ready to ramp up and hopefully take majorities and do investigations. But I think it's really important to remember how hard it will be for a Democratic majority to actually get answers to these questions.
Yes.
There's one thing Donald Trump has perfected in his life, and that is running out the clock. Mm-hmm. That is delay, delay, delay. Don't pay somebody until you actually have to pay them years from when the money was owed. So he is going to instruct his administration to not respond to subpoenas, to not produce this information, and make the Congress go through the very long process of forcing their hand. He firmly believes he can run out the clock if the Democrats take the majority. So I just want everybody's expectations to be somewhat tempered because it's going to be very frustrating. Hopefully, when we take the majority, when we can't get the kind of oversight hearings ginned up as quickly as we would like because of the failure of this administration to cooperate with those investigations.
Claire, let me stick with you here for a moment because to Jackie's point about the messaging of Democrats, it reminded me of the messaging of Democrats during the midterm elections of 2006, which this election, the narratives, the atmosphere feels very similar. The language then was the culture of corruption. And that seems to be the case here. And I'm sticking with you because 2006 was the year you were elected to the Senate. So as someone who was elected during that time, do you see the same dynamics at work here in this time with this president as they were 20 years ago when you were first elected to the Senate?
Yeah, and the corruption is so much bigger and so much more brazen. I mean, it is a spectacle of corruption is what it is. And it is very similar. And, you know, the other thing that's similar here, I defeated a sitting Republican senator in 2006 in a state that's not exactly bright blue. But the other thing that was going on besides the culture of corruption was the Iraq War. And now we have the Iran war. And it is just as unpopular as the Iraq war was. But the added whipped cream and cherry on that Sunday is most Americans blame Donald Trump for the high gas prices because of the Iran war. We didn't have as much of that in terms of affordability issues in 2006 as candidates have today. So it really is a perfect storm for Democrats. And I hope that we don't stub our foot and not stay united and get all this across the finish line.
You know, what's interesting is the Iraq war started very popular, and this Iran war has never been popular. It started as unpopular as the Iraq war ever was. I was talking to someone on a couple of different committees, but most importantly, the Oversight Committee. And what they told me is, like, they believe that them and a couple of other folks on that committee believe that at the end of the day, they're going to be able to do their investigations. They're going to be able to talk to people. Like Claire said, probably not with a lot of help from the White House. But at the end of the day, the referrals, they imagine they will be sending referrals to the DOJ. They know that nothing's going to happen. Their only hope is that a president, picked from the list of Democrats, wins in 2008, is sworn in 2029, and their DOJ looks into the criminal referrals that happen down the road. Talk a little bit about that process and whether or not you're hearing that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, part of all of this planning, both the Schumer bill, which again is not going to become law, at least in the near future, but at least it sets the groundwork. The argument is that down the road in a few years, retroactively, you could look back and actually do the sort of investigatory work that you would want to. And part of the criticism, arguably, of the Biden administration was that they didn't do enough reflexively to look back on the Trump years to do some pursuit there.
You think Republicans wouldn't hate an anti-corruption agency? It feels like something very normal that people would like.
In normal times, perhaps.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there is, I think, one of the things that Democrats are going to have to navigate over these next 2 years is how do you set expectations where we're finally going to fight? We have the levers of power to actually be able to do something, but also keep people, as Claire was just mentioning, within the realm of the possible, of what we're actually going to be able to get done. The one other thing I will add in the context of all of this when it comes to the Schumer initiative is yes, and the general talking about corruption is, if you talk to any Democrat, the messaging for the midterms is affordability, affordability, affordability.
Yeah.
But within that box also very easily slides the corruption piece, because you can very quickly say, you can't afford to buy groceries, you cannot afford to buy gas, but the president is making all this money, he's bringing in these billions and millions of dollars. Make that add up.